This is not a how-to or a DIY. This is simply a guide. A guide to anyone that is actually skilled in doing stuff like this, because this is a very big job. If you mess up, you can mess up your engine to the point where you're probably going to need a new engine. This is not something that everyone can do. This is a very hard task. It actually took me about 2 weeks to do it. And I took my time. I had the Helms manual. And for those who don't know what the Helms manual is, this is the Helms manual. I highly recommend that you get this book if you're going to try to attempt to do this by yourself. If you don't have access to this book, then I would highly recommend looking in forums and guides, which I will definitely have in the description below. I just want everyone to know there is no shame in taking your car to a dealership to get it fixed, to get the timing belt done or the water pump or seals. I did this because I wanted to learn, because I never had the opportunity to do this, even when I was in school, to be a mechanic. Also, side note, this video took me a very long time to put together. I tried my best to be as informative and as helpful as I can. There may be some blind spots and some really blurry areas where you might be confused. If you're confused, please comment down below. I'll be happy to help you as much as I can, or check out the forum that's in the description below. So this is a disclaimer. Anything that happens is on you. It's not on me. I am not responsible for any damage that may have happened to your car while performing this. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please smash the like button, comment down below, and subscribe for more, so I know that I'm doing a good job. And now you may watch the video. So before you begin, you are going to need a couple of things. For starters, you're going to need a 1/2" ratchet with a 1/2" torque wrench with 1/2" extensions. You will also need 3/8 torque wrench, a 3/8 ratchet, 3/8 socket ranging from 10mm all the way to 15mm. There are also long handle metric wrenches. Those are going to be very handy for squeezing in between the timing cover and the body of the car. You'll need a crank pulley holder, a 19 and 17mm deep socket for a 1/2", and this is also optional, the 19mm deep socket for a crank pulley. This is optional, but this is the seal kit for the crankshaft and the camshaft seals. I highly recommend you use a 1/2" impact that's battery operated, way more efficient and easier to use than an air tool. I also recommend a 1/4" 10mm all the way to 8mm sockets, and a 3 to 8 to 1/4" adapter, because whenever you do a timing belt job, you also want to replace the water pump. And lastly, you will need a pry bar and a flathead screwdriver. Hey guys, so today I'm going to be doing a huge job, and that's going to be doing the timing belt. This is something I never did before, so this is my first time doing it, so go easy on me guys. I'm not a professional at doing stuff like this. I'm actually extremely nervous, but I'm going to try doing this as by the book as possible. I even have the service manual to help me with this. I'm pretty confident that it'll go well. I also have a fender cover so I don't mess up my new paint job. I just wanted to do this because of maintenance reasons. I don't really want to have to worry about it later in the future, and I don't really have the money to pay somebody, and I always wanted to learn how to do this. I have all the parts. I ordered them through HondaParts.now and Rock Auto. I'll leave the link down in the description below, and let's get right into this. Okay, so I have this car on jack stands, and I tried putting the car at the lowest setting of the jack stands, and as you can see, it's actually still pretty high, but hopefully it is short enough for us to use the jack stand to hold the oil pan for the engine, because what my plan is here is to remove the power steering pump, remove the belts, the power steering belt and the alternator belt, remove the power steering reservoir, and we're gonna loosen the bolts of the engine mount so we can have more space to work with. Now, before you even think about removing the engine mount or the engine side mount, you need to have an engine jack underneath the oil pan with a cushion, because what this does is it helps keep the engine up so you don't stress out the other engine mounts around the car. And to do that, I'm gonna need to take off one of my rims and the splash shield. So yeah, we're gonna do that. So here we have the drive pulley right there. So the reason why we had to take off the engine mount is to lower this enough so I can fit my socket on there and we can take the drive pulley out, because in order to do the timing belt job, we need to take the drive pulley off. So, I forgot to record me doing this, but pretty much I am also taking off the drive belt, the main drive belt. I already showed you how I took off the power steering belt, but pretty much what I did is, if you can see, the glove isn't blocking it, I loosened those two bolts right there in order to get this screw, god damn it, well, I hit the floor. I loosened those two screws to get this main bolt out from bottom. This is one of the mounting bolts for the alternator. This is at the bottom of the alternator. And basically when you pull this out, you want to press the alternator down, because you took off the bottom mounting bolt. You want to push this down, and what that does is it releases the tension for the drive belt so you can take it off. So now that I got the driving belts off, here comes the scary part, which is unscrewing the side engine mounts with a 17mm deep impact socket, 1/2 inch. And basically what that's gonna do, and if I can just move the fender cover, it's gonna lower that enough so that way I can turn the pulley to have the timing gears at top dead center. And as you can see here, I have my jack underneath the oil pan, underneath some soft cushion, so it doesn't damage the oil pan. So yeah, let's do this. Hopefully I don't die doing it. After lowering your engine to an appropriate length, this is basically going to give you enough clearance to try to pull the drive pulley off. But before you do that, you want to rotate the pulley counterclockwise to get the cam gears top dead center. Normally the gears should be pointed up. There's arrows, as you can see as it's rotating, there's arrows that should be putting up, and lines, indentations in the middle. I'll show you a picture right here of what it should look like. So this is what's going to look like on the diagram in the Helms manual. I highly recommend you get the book. It's extremely informative, or if you can't get the book, you can go Google it, and I'm pretty sure there's pictures online. But you need to make sure that the camshafts are top dead center, because if it's not top dead center, then this is where you can actually mess some stuff up permanently. I can't explain how crucial it is to make sure that the cams and the crankshaft are top dead center before you take off the belt. So, since I already have the drive pulley lower enough for me to remove, this is where this is going to come in play. So, the main purpose of this is to hold the drive pulley in place while you remove the drive pulley bolt, or the crank bolt. Essentially, you're going to want to have a 1/2 inch ratchet here, and since we're going to be loosening it, we're going to want to set the ratchet to tighten, because we don't want the ratchet to spin while we're trying to remove this. This is what I would like to call our last resort. So let's say the drive pulley doesn't want to come out because our impact isn't powerful enough. We can use this. This is essentially a drive pulley or a crank bolt remover. This is supposed to be used for impacts, so that's why it's super thick, and it's recommended, or I should say it's advised, not to use an impact to tighten the drive pulley, but you can use it to remove it, which is what I'm going to do right now. So to remove this, I would honestly recommend using a pry bar, and if I can just reach it right here, I would recommend using a pry bar like this. So again, I'm sorry if this is just being kind of a son of a gun, but see how I loosened it by prying it gently. If this thing can focus, there we go. So I'm just going to remove it ever so slightly, and there goes our drive pulley. So this is the timing cover diagram in the Helms manual. There are a total of 5 10mm bolts holding up the plastic timing cover shield, and there's also 2 rubber gaskets that you need to pull out, otherwise you're really going to have a tough time trying to pull the timing cover off. There's also like a lock pin right in the adjuster maintenance bolt. It should look like this. I do want to warn you that this is for the auto tensioner. Please, please, please don't try to loosen it all the way. It's actually meant to just hold the tension for the auto tensioner, so it'll be easier for you to grab it out. It is not a bolt that actually comes off. Right now, I already got the plastic lower timing cover off, and it was not easy because it was stuck between this and it was stuck between this as well, the CV axle boot balancer, which this is a Raxel CV axle, so it was I had to practically just wiggle it and bend it to try to get it off, and I broke a few plastic pieces, understandably so. It's older. I'm pretty sure if you guys wouldn't break it like I did. I think I was just being very impatient, which is something you don't want to do when you're doing this job for your first time. This is my first time, and I just wanted to have it on record that this is my first time doing it. I'm not a professional. This is stuff that I'm absorbing and learning as I go along, and I'm trying to do this as carefully as possible while taking my time. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna take off the balancer pulley off and the balancer belt off, and then I'm gonna take off the timing belt off, and then we'll go from there. Before you take off the balancer belt, you want to basically go to the side of the block where the drain plug would be facing you, and you want to take out the maintenance bolt, which is right here in this diagram, and you want to shove a skinny screwdriver through that, because this is going to basically hold the balancer in place so it doesn't move, because this has to be synchronized with top dead center with the belt itself. So there is a mark on the right side cam gear, and there is a marking on the left side. You got to make sure that you have the screwdriver in while it's on those markings, so that way when you put the belt back on, you don't have to be struggling so much to try to get the markings to line up when you're putting it back on. So this is the balancer belt. To take this off, you're going to need to loosen the timing balancer belt pulley, which should be a 15mm bolt if I recall correctly. I could be wrong on that. Basically, you want to loosen that bolt, and the pulley should be able to go up. Once it goes up, you should be able to undo the balancer belt. From there, you should be able to pull the balancer belt pulley. This is what it's going to look like. It's very important. Please don't lose it. And this is going to be the crankshaft sensor. It has 4 10mm bolts. Just undo them and you should be able to pull it out. This is the top dead center marking for the crankshaft. There's an arrow on the block itself, and there's like an arrow on the key. Basically, you want to make sure that those arrows are pointing at each other, otherwise your crankshaft is not top dead center. It's very important that you try to get this before you take the belt off, because if you take the belt off and that's not top dead center, you could possibly bend some valves trying to put the crank back at top dead center, because the cams are at top dead center. So it's kind of a hassle, so please try to be careful. This part is completely optional. You do not have to do this unless your seals are leaking oil. Then this is something that you would probably want to watch. But essentially what I did was I had an extension. I put it in the middle of the cam to keep it from moving, and I try to loosen it with a 14mm socket. The problem with this is that it actually moves the cam. It's not perfect. I highly recommend you do not do what I'm about to try. There is a kit on eBay that's $10 that can hold the cams in place for you while you loosen the cam bolts. This is a basically Archimedes way to do it, and I highly recommend that you buy the kit to save yourself the trouble and pain. I didn't know that kit existed, that's why I'm doing it like this, but don't do what I'm doing. Buy the kit. It's $10. It's on eBay. It's really cheap. I'll leave a link in the description below. So this is what the cams are going to look like with the cam gears off, and as you can see, there's a little bit of oil seeping from my cams, so I decided to replace the cam seals. I used a very special kit that removes and installs cam seals or crankshaft seals. Basically, it's like an extractor. You take these 2 picks, you plug them into the seal, and then you just twist it, tightening it, which basically pulls the seal out. I'm going to tell you and explain how to use the kit to put the seal back in without using like a block of wood or any other weird method. So I got the cam seals off. I had to finesse this side right here. I had to finesse it by basically I had to remove this bracket just so I can move the brake lines a little closer, so that way I can fit the tool to fit there. This is a really good kit, guys. I highly recommend it if you guys are going to do any seal replacement work. This kit pretty much has all attachments to fit nearly every vehicle. I'll try to leave a link down in the description below, but I'm going to teach you guys how to use this kit for your seals. So what you want to do is you want to get your cam pulley bolt, and basically what you want to do is you want to use any of these attachments right here to fit around this thread. So I selected this one, to fit in. And as you can see, it perfectly fits on. So next, you want to use the universal adapter plate, which is this thing right here. This thing, I think, will be, I don't know where it'll be in the kit, but every kit should have one. This is a universal plate. And pretty much what you want to do is you want to put this, what you want to do is you want to put this with that, so that way it fits. Because this is the universal plate, it'll fit with pretty much everything. So it'll fit like that, or, whoops. Sorry guys, I'm doing this one-handed. It'll fit like this. It'll be flush. So that way you can put this together. Because what you're basically gonna do, you wanna find something, one of these couplers to fit your new seal. Hello guys, so these are my new camshaft oil seals, and as you can see, they have a little screw, like a little retaining ring around it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna prep these for installation. I'm just gonna put a little bit of Honda Bond on the outside of the cam seal. Now we're going to do the crank seal, and pretty much there are 4 10mm screws there. That is the crank sensor, which I just disconnected. So pretty much this should slide off like that easily. If not, you might want to use a pry bar to gently pry this off. You do not want to break this. And that right here is the key for the crank pulley. So we're just gonna put that aside and take this out right here. Removing the crank seal was a bit of a challenge for me because when I tried to extract it using my kit broke and it ended up tearing the seal, so I had to take the seal out. It wasn't an option for me. So I ended up buying this seal remover from eBay, and it didn't really work. So I ended up improvising and using a vice grip and taking one of the seals plugs and yanking it out. I know there's some methods where people get like a screw and they screw it in onto the seal and they rip it out, but the chances of the screw actually working is actually pretty slim, so I didn't do that. But as you can see, I ended up pulling the seal out, and I found the correct adapter for the drive pulley bolt, and I basically screwed that back on into the pulley key, and I basically just tightened the pulley bolt enough just to drive the seal into its place. The next thing we're going to do is replace the water pump. This is kind of straightforward. All you got to do is just remove the 6, I think they're 8 or 9 millimeter bolts, and basically you're just going to want to try prying it off because it's going to be stuck on there with some sort of sealant. You do want to get a bucket because as soon as you pull that water pump out, there's going to be coolant that's going to be left over, and it's probably going to spill all over the place, so get a bucket to prevent that. Basically what I did was I got the new water pump, I used the gasket, and I just put some Honda Bond over it just for safety measure, and then I tightened all of it down, and I used the respected torque spec. Okay, so I'm going to briefly talk about the auto tensioner because it is very important, and I don't think I need to go over it that much because it's pretty straightforward. Pretty much what you're going to want to do is remove the old auto tensioner after removing the timing belt. It's just 2 bolts that holds it in place, and then after that you want to replace it with the brand new one. Normally, whenever you replace the timing belt, you want to replace it with the auto tensioner. This is done for reliability, so that way you don't have to do all this hard work and then your auto tensioner goes bad and your belt doesn't have tension anymore.
So I had a lot of problems with this part, but this is pretty much going to be installing the belt. As you can see by the pictures, there are numbers. That is the order of which the belt should go around. So it should go around the crank, then the tensioner, then around the water pump. Then you have to put it around the cam. I think it's the intake side, and then over the exhaust. Unfortunately, it was extremely hard for me to do it, so I'm going to explain how I did it. Hopefully it helps you. But I honestly think that this was meant for the engine to be outside the car, not accommodating for it inside the car.
Alright, so I just put on the new belt, and it was actually a real hassle to try to get this thing on. I'm sorry if the fan is just blowing into the speaker and all you hear is just the wind. I'm going to try to talk over that. But pretty much I struggled trying to put this belt on. So I'm going to tell you how I did it. I'm going to try walking you through it. So the book says that you want to try going down from the crank over the tensioner pulley, which is down there, around the water pump, and then you want to go over the intake cam, and then the exhaust cam is last. You could do it that way, but it's actually a lot harder to do it that way. The Helms manual states that in order to do it this way, you need like a part that Honda makes, or a tool I should say, which is the belt slider, which helps slide this belt over the exhaust cam. It's very difficult, or I think this is the intake cam. Either way, it's the right cam. It's extremely hard to do it because of all this stuff in the way, and trying to get enough slack to come over here and place the belt over so it can basically go in place. So I decided to do something differently, and I decided to pretty much put the belt over the crank first, and I brought the belt up here, and I wrapped it over these two gears, these cam gears, and I zip tied the top, both the top. I'll try showing a picture. And I brought it around the water pump to where it's over the adjuster tensioner pulley. So what I did to try to get this thing to fit over the pulley, you could try to pry and try to like go under it and try to get like a small enough screwdriver. You don't really have enough clearance from here to there. It's very short clearance. So what I decided to do was I decided to loosen this bolt right here. I loosened it a little bit. I didn't loosen it all the way where you couldn't put the bolt back in. I loosened it a little bit, which by the way, the book doesn't state how many foot-pounds this should be. So I just did 16 foot-pounds. But moving on, I loosened this a little bit to make this drop so I can slide this over, and then I tightened it. And that's how I was able to get the belt on. So I'm basically going to rotate this to get the slack off the middle, because you want it tight in between here because you don't want the gears to skip. I'm just going to turn it so that some of the play can be here, and then I'm going to take off the auto tensioner block right there, so that way this thing can be tensioned. Okay, so I was rotating this counterclockwise, so that way I can transfer the tension this way. So it's pretty tight here, it's pretty tight here. You want this a little bit loose right here, just a little bit of play. You want to be able to twist it just a little bit. So now I'm going to take off this so that I can have tension.
Removing the lower timing cover was a bit of a hassle. Actually, let me rephrase that. It was actually a total nightmare. As you can see, a lot of the plastic tabs have been broken off trying to remove it. And I didn't record myself doing it because I was struggling so hard, and it was taking me a while to take it off that I didn't want to really show that process. So this is kind of the after, and there's a bit of cracks in the plastic. This plastic is like over 20 years old, so of course it's going to be very brittle. But the problem is that this was between tight spaces. There wasn't a lot of space for you to try to remove this easily. It was actually there was a lot of things in the way to take it out, like the radius bar and the CV axle itself, it was a complete nightmare. So it's honestly making me think that the engine was actually supposed to be removed for a timing belt job. I'm not saying that you have to or it's extremely necessary, because I was able to change the timing belt and I didn't even need to remove the engine. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that it would have been a lot more easier if the engine was already out, and if you're doing a water pump and you're already changing the oil to change the seals. Yeah, I think that the designers intended it to be removed. So if we go over here, this is my brand new lower timing cover, and I have the seal right there. Here's one thing. Don't ever remove the rubber seal around the lower timing cover. Do not ever remove it, because it will not go back on the way it's supposed to. For some reason, it was glued on, and the manufacturers didn't say what glue it used to keep it on. So by removing it, you're basically got to rip it off from its old adhesive, and there is no record of an adhesive being used to put the seal back on. So don't remove it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this back on with some epoxy that is industrial use. So essentially the whole goal is to keep the seal on, properly on, while I put the timing cover back on. So as long as it can stay on, the bolts will pretty much hold it in place.
Alright, so I decided to let the glue dry overnight, and the seal is snug. It's pretty snug. So I am going to try my absolute best to try to put this on without breaking anything. I'm going to try my best to show you guys how I did it. It's going to be a random shot in the dark. I really hope I can get this on without breaking anything. If I can't get this done in 5 minutes, then I'll do a time lapse, and I'll try to explain to you how I did it. Okay, so ultimately, I was forced to take off the radius bar. This is practically the author of all of my pain. This was the reason why it was super difficult to take the timing cover off. It was because this was in the way. So ultimately, I eliminated the problem by removing it. Basically, there was just 2 bolts I had to take off here and a 17 that's over there. I'll show you more in detail. I was able to get it off with my battery-operated impact, which is why I recommend it. But right there, I was able to take that off. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is if you're going to do a timing belt job, take off the radius bar. It will save you so much pain, and it will save you from breaking my timing cover. I didn't know that at the time, and it was very hard for me. Essentially, what I had to do was I had to take off my axle nut. I had to push in my axles just so I can get enough clearance, and my strut fork just so I can get access between those 2 bolts. You may not have to do that. It may be easier for me. It may be easier for you, I should say. It'll probably be easier for you. For me, it wasn't. And ultimately, I had to do all of this. You probably don't have to do all this. So, yeah, try to take off the radius bar if you're going to do the timing belt job. I highly recommend it. Alright, so this is how the crank pulley holder is going to work. I have this set to off, or I should say I should have it set to on, on the ratchet. And basically what this is going to do is while I'm twisting it, since this is between the axle, it's going to hold in place so the pulley won't move. So let's give it a shot. That should have been set to off. All right, let's try that one more time. Uh, 180 foot-pounds.
Unfortunately, my camera died during the process of putting everything back together, but I'm going to leave you guys a few tips before I go. For starters, make sure you top off the engine with oil, since you drained it for the timing belt. This engine normally takes 5.1 quarts. You can fact check me on that if I'm wrong. And also make sure that you top off the coolant since you replaced the water pump. You can reuse the previous coolant that you used if it hasn't been too long since you replaced the coolant. Otherwise, I would suggest refilling it with brand new coolant just to get that out of the way. I'm going to leave you guys with some torque spec values here. And again, I'm really sorry that I didn't go through every crucial detail into this guide, but essentially I wanted this guide to be the ultimate guide because so far I haven't really seen anybody make an in-depth guide. And maybe in the future I'll make something more refined and less time consuming. If you guys enjoyed this video, please let me know down in the comments below, subscribe for more, and hit the bell if you want to be notified. Peace.